Masaki Sato is no foreign name to longtime fans of the series and a favourite of the hardcore fandom. His first input into the franchise was with the third Dragon Ball movie, Mystical Adventure, as a key animator, and went on to contribute in 10 more episodes of the original Dragon Ball series. Then in Dragon Ball Z, he also worked as a key animator for an additional 19 episodes, and contributed key animation to some fan favourite Dragon Ball movies such as Cooler's Revenge and Broly the Legendary Super Saiyan, as well as many other classics. But his most notable mark in the Dragon Ball Z franchise was animating one of the most iconic scenes in all of shonen and possibly anime, aired on June 19th, 1991, and that is the Super Saiyan transformation. However, Sato's resume of work continues into many more series. This involves several roles, and one being a character designer for some big names such as Initial D for the second, fifth, and the final stage, also the Slam Dunk TV series as well as a movie, and even Interstellar, a film which accompanied Daft Punk's second album, Discovery. He also has filled the role of animation director many times, as well as chief animation director. So with a record like that, let's take a look at his work now specifically, and the quality of his artwork and the overall magic behind it. Now, one thing that has always attracted me about his work is how he emulated the gritty feel to Toriyama's style perfectly, with shading under the eyes and even drawing pen strokes on the eyebrow itself. With this close-up especially, you can see how good the folds of the skin look, as well as the expression he could pack into a character. This equally goes for other characters such as Goku, which adds to the intensity of a scene dramatically. Additionally, his knack to replicate Toriyama's style can be seen in no better example than this. When looking at these two images side to side, it's clear features such as the eye shape and nose are especially Toriyama-esque. The placement of the hair is near identical to Toriyama's panel, as well as the shading under the chin, following the same direction as in the manga. His ability to replicate Toriyama's style is clearly outstanding, and if the topic of bringing the manga to life comes up, his name would definitely be at the forefront. Furthermore, the placement of shading on a character is another charm of his work. Characters felt three-dimensional and showed his knowledge of the planes of the face. A great example of characters feeling three-dimensional is with this close-up of Piccolo from Movie 2. Notice how the second tone of shading is placed intricately in the creases of the face. The eyes especially feel like they are sitting in a socket, and this is one problem that I had with Yamamura's look, with characters' faces coming off somewhat flat, and shows that using several tones of shading isn't necessarily bad, but more so it just comes down to your placement of these tones. It should also be noted how well he kept to the character sheets, as well as adapting to the rapid changes in Dragon Ball style, with the rounder-esque look fading away in the new, at the time, Dragon Ball Z series. Again, his ability to replicate Toriyama's artwork is still spectacular, and the expression, like always, drives the intensity of the scene. And one driving factor that I didn't mention before is the quality of his line work. Especially on close-ups, you would have thick, heavy line work with a lot of variation of width, which only further added to the already great depth portrayed in his characters. However, over time, as Dragon Ball's art style would change in the manga, with Toriyama adopting a more refined take on anatomy, creating a somewhat more cleaner look in a sense, with less pen strokes being used to shade out muscle groups and features such as the collarbone, and as Katsuyoshi Nakatsuru detailed in an interview that he would buy Shonen Jump and always cut out the Dragon Ball section, as well as all the key framers who wanted to match the latest art style. And of course, the character sheets would also take inspiration from Toriyama's design. So it can definitely be assumed from this interview, as well as Sato's already clear ability to replicate the manga, that Toriyama's design choices had an impact on his style, as it did on other animators. Therefore, Sato's work would take on many of these characteristics. And so as a result, later in his work, there is less pen strokes used for shading around features such as the nose and ears. That's not to say that his later work was devoid of it by any means, but it is definitely toned down. But his artwork is still great as ever. But let's now start to discuss his animation. Now, it's no secret that a lot of animation generally throughout Z often relied more on artwork as its driving force, rather than actual animated movement of these characters, and Sato's work is no exception. But regardless, in my opinion, if a scene can still deliver impact and achieve the vision laid out by the writers of an episode and the storyboard, I personally see no problem. And when it comes to artwork, he has proved that he is more than competent in this field. Now, I originally did a breakdown of the Raccoon vs Vegeta battle under the belief that the scenes I was analysing was his when Eguchi was actually the key animator for these scenes, who I love for similar reasons in regards to style. But anyway, Sato is actually the animation supervisor. However, it is still worth pointing out that as a result of him filling this role, this episode was visually among some of the best looking in the series. There was visual consistency with characters looking quite on model, and the episode as a whole felt like the manga coming to life. And that raw, gritty manga feel saturated this episode. Not only that, additionally there was a great plethora of artwork, and I only wish that he supervised more episodes like this one. Now onto a scene he did key animation for, and that is when Vegeta gets hit by the Genki Dama, or Spirit Bomb. And once again, all the speed lines everywhere, and how he stretches the proportions like crazy, and brings all this wild expression just like the source material, and gives such power and ferocity. Truly one of the greats. Now I could continue to go on about how good his power-ups were, and the weight his punches held, but I will have to leave it there for the animation side. Although one comment I will make is that his animation, not always, but it could sometimes come off feeling somewhat stiff and robotic. It isn't usually too noticeable, but there are moments like this cut between Goku and Cooler where this problem is definitely more obvious. But from an overview, with all the strengths he portrayed in his work, I feel like this problem is dwarfed in comparison. And finally, let's look over some of his current Dragon Ball work. Now when it comes to style, it can differ between fans, but personally, I love his newer work with a somewhat similar reasoning I mentioned for Toriyama's Kanziban covers I gave in my recent review, how I simply enjoy just seeing different takes on Dragon Ball. One factor in particular is how the line work is quite sharp and angular, much like Toriyama's became in later arcs, and he still uses pen strokes for shading around the chin and around various muscle groups, and surprisingly uses a lot in particular for the clothing on Goku. But additionally, the characters also carry that more mature look Toriyama went for later on, with the jawline looking more defined and realistic with smaller ears also. Another feature that was in Toriyama's later work was reducing the fluffiness of the clothing, which is another stylistic note now in Sato's work. However, unlike Toriyama, at the same time he still retains some of his old traits in several pieces with the thicker eyebrows and pupils, which was a common feature throughout his older work. Furthermore, the way he draws this muscle referred to as the sternocleidomastoid or sternomastoid, which is commonly drawn quite large, is a trait which still remains in his work. For comparison, Toriyama usually just indicated this part of the muscle, which works fine as well considering it is usually more prominent on a person, but Sato's stylized take went well with the bulky design. However, he now indicates the split on some characters between these two groups, now with several pen strokes, giving a somewhat more realistic take. The way Sato draws a lot of anatomy for the forearm and upper arm is quite different again, so not only how he did previously, but also to Toriyama and other animators I've seen on the series. And he shades out various muscle groups with pen strokes, once again reminding me of the realistic take Toriyama seemed to implement in some of the Kanziban covers, notably Tien. And it is possible this stylized take in general evolved from working on series with more realistic designs such as Slam Dunk and several Fist of the North Star movies, and actually when looking at some more recent art he drew of Slam Dunk and looking at the folds of the clothing and even the ears, it does share several similar traits with his Dragon Ball art in regards to Goku's clothing, and explains his different take on ears being a lot less larger and more refined compared to his older work. And overall, I personally love these design choices. They feel fresh and new while still holding several of his older traits in regards to the larger eyes, eyebrows, and the sternomastoid, giving a hint of nostalgia forwarded on by some older Toriyama-esque traits with the more sharper line work. And one of my favourite aspects still remains, and that is the gritty line work. And with that final note, thank you for watching this video, and share your appreciation if you enjoyed it. I spent a lot of time researching this topic and really trying my best to do one of my favourite animators to ever work on Dragon Ball justice. This guy is an absolute legend of the series and deserves nothing less. And honestly, this would have to be my favourite video I've ever done. Usually throughout the process there will be some topics I really enjoy talking about, but as I get through the scripting process and get to the editing, motivation can kind of drain. But throughout the whole process, I had so much fun, and I really hope you enjoyed this video too. Although I am feeling a little burnt out lately, and I finally got a new cord for my tablet so I can finally complete some commissions and do some new artwork. So it might be a week or two before I come out with a new video. We'll see. And with that, I hope to see you soon in the next video.